Right now, your blood is running through your veins in a color so familiar, so perfectly ordinary, that you'd never think to question it. Red. Always red. But what if it wasn't? What if a surgeon opened someone up one day and found something that looked less like a human body and more like a scene from a science fiction film? And what if that's exactly what happened? Not once, not twice, but in cases so bizarre that even the world's top doctors stood frozen in disbelief. The human body has secrets, and some of them are almost impossible to believe. Medicine has for centuries operated on one unspoken promise, that beneath our differences, we are all fundamentally the same. Same anatomy, same chemistry, same rules. That promise is what makes diagnosis possible, what lets a doctor trained in one country treat a patient from another. It's the invisible foundation everything is built on. But scattered through history, in dusty case files, old medical journals, and the memories of stunned surgeons, are cases that broke that promise completely. Cases that forced science to rewrite its own assumptions. And of all of them, 3 stand out above the rest. 3 cases that didn't just surprise medicine, they shook it. The first takes us back to a boy named Harry Eastlack, born in Philadelphia in 1933. At the age of 5, Harry broke his leg, a common accident. The kind that heals, leaves a scar in the memory, and fades. But Harry's body didn't get the message. Instead of healing normally, something extraordinary and terrifying began. His own muscles, tendons, and connective tissues started turning to bone. Slowly, relentlessly, his body began building a second skeleton around itself, like armor it had decided it needed. You could hear it in the stiffness that crept into his limbs. You could see it in the way his joints stopped bending. His neck locked first, then his shoulders, then his spine, vertebra by vertebra, until his entire torso was encased in a rigid shell of new bone that his own body had manufactured without permission. What was happening inside Harry had a name: fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva, FOP. A condition so rare that at the time, barely anyone in the world had ever seen it. It is caused by a single mutation in a gene responsible for signaling bone growth, a gene that, in Harry's case, had lost its off switch. In a healthy body, soft tissue repairs itself as soft tissue. In Harry's body, every injury, every bruise, every small trauma sent a chemical signal screaming through his cells: build bone here. And the body listened. It always listened. By the time Harry was in his 20s, he could barely move. By his 30s, his jaw had fused shut. He lived trapped inside his own body, frozen in a position slightly turned to one side, able to move only his lips and a few fingers. He died at 39. But before he died, Harry made one extraordinary decision. He asked that his body be donated to science, so that others might one day be spared. Today, his skeleton stands at the Mitter Museum in Philadelphia, a second skeleton fused over the first, visible to anyone who walks through those doors. You can see exactly where the bone crept in. You can trace in silence the shape of a life slowly turned to stone. Now, you might assume that a condition like Harry's is the outer limit of strangeness. That the body, however unpredictable, follows at least one rule: it builds only itself. But that's not what you think it is, because sometimes the body doesn't build alone. In 1999, a man in India named Sanju Bhagat was rushed to hospital with a stomach so distended it pressed against his lungs and he could barely draw a breath. His abdomen had been swelling for years, slowly, stubbornly, and doctors had watched it grow without ever finding a clear cause. Now it had become a crisis. They assumed a tumor, large, probably, serious. They prepared for a standard surgery, the kind that happens in operating rooms around the world every single day. But when they made the incision and opened Sanju up, a hand emerged, then feet, then a partially formed body, head, limbs, fragments of organs, folded and suspended inside him like something that had been waiting there, in the dark, for decades. Sanju Bhagat had been carrying his own twin inside him for 36 years. The twin, undeveloped, parasitic, surviving by tapping directly into Sanju's blood supply, had been growing silently in his abdomen since before birth, since the very first days of cell division, when a single embryo had simply absorbed the other. The condition is called fetus in fetu, and it is almost unfathomably rare. It occurs when a twin embryo becomes enveloped by the other in the earliest days of development, folded inside, cut off, and kept alive by a shared blood connection for a lifetime, absorbed, hidden, invisible for decades. The doctors who performed that surgery described it later with a single word: unbelievable, and yet it was real. The twin was there, and Sanju, once recovered, was finally, for the first time in his life, truly alone in his own body. Let that land for a moment. 2 cases, One man whose body built itself into a cage of its own bone, another who carried a hidden passenger for 36 years without a single symptom he could name. Both feel like fiction. Both are documented, verified, witnessed by medical professionals, and recorded in the scientific literature. And yet neither of them is the strangest. Because there is a third case, and this one didn't involve bone, or twins, or anything the human body had ever been recorded doing before. This one changed color. In 2007, a surgical team in Canada prepared to operate on a patient taking a common migraine medication called sumatriptan. Routine, familiar, the kind of pre-op preparation that runs on autopilot after 1,000 repetitions. They made the incision, and the blood that emerged from the wound was not red, it was dark green. A deep, rich, unmistakable forest green. The color of the sea before a storm. The color of old bottle glass. The color of something that had no business flowing through a human vein, pouring from the wound as naturally as if it had always been that way. The surgeons stopped. They checked. They verified. They looked at each other across the operating table. And then they published it in The Lancet, one of the most respected medical journals in the world, because what they had witnessed was too important and too unbelievable to stay in that room. The condition is called sulfhemoglobinemia. It occurs when sulfur, introduced into the bloodstream through certain medications taken in high doses, binds permanently to hemoglobin, the molecule in your red blood cells that normally carries oxygen and gives blood its color. When sulfur bonds to hemoglobin, it creates a new compound called sulfhemoglobin. And sulfhemoglobin does not absorb light the way normal hemoglobin does. It reflects it differently, entirely differently. The result, to the naked human eye standing in a bright operating theater, is blood that looks unmistakably, undeniably, shockingly green. The patient survived. The medication was stopped. Over weeks, as the affected red blood cells aged and were replaced by new ones, the blood gradually shifted back toward red. But for a moment in that Canadian operating room, the most fundamental assumption in all of medicine, that human blood is red, has always been red, will always be red, turned out to be wrong. Here's what those 3 moments, taken together, actually reveal, and it's something deeper than any single diagnosis. The human body is not a machine running a fixed program. It is a negotiation, a continuous, fragile, endlessly complex negotiation between genes and environment, between chemistry and chance, between what the body is designed to do and what it actually does when circumstances push it into territory no one has mapped yet. Every rule we call absolute is really just a rule that has held so far. Bone stays bone until a single genetic switch jams open. A body contains one person until it doesn't. Blood runs red until the chemistry shifts by a single molecular bond. What FOP, fetus in fetu, and sulfhemoglobinemia share, beneath all their differences, is the same quiet, unsettling message. The body has more possibilities than medicine has discovered. It always has. It always will. And that's the shift that changes everything if you let it. For most of human history, the body was a mystery we explained with myths, with spirits, with humors, with blind fate. Then science arrived and replaced mystery with certainty. We mapped the genome, we sequenced proteins, we built machines that can see inside a living brain in real time. And in doing so, we began to believe, quietly, collectively, that we were close to finished. That the major surprises were behind us, that the body at last was known. But Harry Eastlack's second skeleton says otherwise. Sanju Bhagat's twin says otherwise. A surgical team standing over a pool of green blood says otherwise. The surprises are not behind us. They are ahead of us, hidden in bodies that have not yet been opened, in conditions that have not yet been named, in chemical reactions that have not yet been witnessed. So here is the question these 3 cases leave ringing in the air. If the human body can build a second skeleton from its own soft tissue, conceal an entire life form for 36 years, and run green blood through a living person's veins, what else is it hiding? What else has it always been capable of that we simply haven't seen yet? What conditions exist right now in bodies around the world that science has no category for? What will the next operating room discover in the next unexpected moment when everything the surgeon thought they knew about the human body turns out to be only part of the story?